The stars in the distant reaches of space shimmered brightly, their lights dancing across the vast dark expanse. It was in this quiet, distant place that the human fleet came upon something no one had expected, something that would change the course of their mission forever. Captain Elias Grant stood at the helm of the Starfire, a massive exploration ship, gazing at the empty space ahead. His crew was quiet, focused on their tasks, while the hum of the ship's engines echoed softly in the background. They had been traveling through this uncharted region of the galaxy for weeks, searching for new life, new worlds, and possibly even new allies. But what they had found was something unexpected, something that no one could have predicted. The Celestians had never meant to be in this part of space. They had once lived on a beautiful planet, one that was rich with life and thriving with their peaceful civilization. But now, that planet was a memory. The Celestians, a species of tall, elegant beings with glowing eyes and flowing silver skin, had been exiled by the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, a group of alien races that ruled with an iron fist. The Celestians had never been a warlike people. They had never fought for control or sought to expand their influence. Instead, they had lived in harmony with nature, using their advanced technology to heal and protect the ecosystems of their world. Their leaders were known for their wisdom and compassion, and they had shared their knowledge with the galaxy, offering peace and understanding to anyone who would listen. But not all the races in the galaxy were interested in peace. The Galactic Council, a coalition of powerful and aggressive alien species, saw the Celestians as weak. They saw their peaceful ways as a threat, something that could undermine their rule. And so, they made a decision that would change the Celestians' fate forever. The Council ordered the Celestians' expulsion, forcing them from their home world and casting them adrift in the cold expanse of space. The Celestians had no defense, no army to fight back. All they could do was watch as their world, once full of life, disappeared behind them. For the Celestians, there was no place in the galaxy for their peaceful way of life. Elias had read about the Celestians before, brief mentions in the history books, stories passed down by explorers who had come across them, but never had he imagined they would cross paths with such a species. His mission was simple: chart the stars, document new life forms, and ensure the safety of his crew. He had never expected to be faced with the suffering of an entire species. As Elias stood on the bridge of the Starfire, he could feel the weight of the decision resting on his shoulders. The ship's sensors had detected something strange, a faint signal. The source came from an uninhabited world in the farthest reaches of space. It was as if the planet itself was calling out, begging for help. The signal was weak, but unmistakable. It was a cry for assistance. "Captain, we're receiving an unusual signal," Lieutenant Hawk said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "It's coming from that planet. It's strange, almost like a distress call." Elias leaned over, the console staring at the blinking coordinates. It was an isolated world, far from any known routes, but there was something about it that tugged at his instincts. His crew was trained for exploration, not rescue missions, but something inside him told him this was different. Something had to be done. "Plot a course to the source of the signal," Elias ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We need to investigate. Prepare the team for an away mission." As the Starfire adjusted course and made its way toward the planet, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something far bigger than they could understand. The stars outside the viewport seemed to grow dimmer as they neared their destination, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. What they would find on that world would change everything. The planet they approached was desolate, a barren rock orbiting a dying star. Its surface was cracked, broken, and devoid of any visible life. Yet the signal persisted, a faint whisper on the edge of the universe. Elias could feel a sense of dread building in his chest, but he pushed it aside. His mission was clear: find the source of the signal and offer aid, if possible. "We've arrived, Captain," Hawk said, his voice tight with anticipation. "The signal is coming from the planet's surface. It's coming from beneath the ground." Elias nodded, his mind already processing the information. "Prepare the shuttle. We're going down to investigate." The crew moved swiftly, preparing for the mission with quiet efficiency. The shuttle, small and sleek, was quickly prepped for the descent. Elias and a small team of his most trusted officers climbed aboard, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Elias looked out the window. The planet's surface was covered in dust and debris, remnants of a once thriving world. There were no signs of life, no structures, no vegetation. It was as if the entire planet had been abandoned, left to rot in the emptiness of space. The shuttle touched down on a flat expanse, kicking up dust as it landed. The crew stepped out, their boots crunching against the barren ground. The air was thin and dry, the temperature harsh and unwelcoming. But the signal, the faint cry for help, was still there, guiding them forward. "Stay alert," Elias said, his voice low. "We don't know what we're walking into." They moved through the desolate landscape, scanning for any signs of life. It wasn't long before they found something, an entrance hidden beneath a pile of rubble. It was a doorway, ancient and weathered but still intact. The signal was coming from behind it. "Looks like we've found the source," Lieutenant Hawk said, his voice filled with awe. "What do you think it is, Captain?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He was too focused on the door. Something about it felt wrong. But they had come this far. There was no turning back now. He motioned for the team to prepare. "Let's go inside." The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. The air inside was stale, and the walls were covered in strange symbols that Elias couldn't understand. As they moved deeper into the structure, the signal grew stronger. It was almost deafening now, a constant hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. At the end of the corridor, they reached a large chamber, and there, in the center, was the source of the signal, a group of Celestians, their silver skin glowing faintly in the darkness. They were lying on the ground, weak and frail, their bodies emaciated from starvation and exposure. Their once proud features were now gaunt and hollow, their eyes dull with exhaustion. Elias felt a pang of sorrow in his chest. These beings, who had once been so vibrant, so full of life, were now on the brink of extinction. The Celestians had been left to die, abandoned by the galaxy they had once sought to help. "We found them," Hawk whispered, his voice heavy with disbelief. They're the ones who sent the signal." Elias stepped forward, his heart heavy with empathy. He had read about the Celestians, their peaceful ways, their technological advancements, their commitment to harmony. He never imagined they would end up in such a dire situation. But now that he had found them, he knew he couldn't walk away. "We'll help them," Elias said, his voice firm with resolve. "No one else will, but we will." As he knelt beside the nearest Celestian, a soft, warm voice spoke from the darkness. You came." Elias looked up, startled, and saw the faint outline of a Celestian leader. Her eyes were dim, but there was still a glimmer of hope in them. She was weaker than the others, but she was alive. "We came," Elias said softly, "and we will take you home." The leader's lips parted in a faint smile. "Thank you. You are the first to answer our call. The galaxy rejected us, but you chose to save us." Elias nodded, his mind racing. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. This mission was far from over, and he would not let the Celestians fall into darkness. Captain Elias Grant stood in the cold, dimly lit chamber, the sound of his breathing steady as he surveyed the scene before him. The Celestians, once a proud and advanced species, were now frail and vulnerable, lying on the ground in a state of desperate need. They had called for help, and by some miracle, humans had answered. He looked at the Celestian leader, Lyra. Her silver skin still held the faintest glow, though her once radiant eyes were clouded with exhaustion. She had been one of the first to speak when they arrived. The gratitude in her voice had been clear, but so had the sorrow. These beings, who had once known peace and prosperity, had lost everything. Elias could not shake the image of their fallen civilization. The Celestians had once been revered for their wisdom and their willingness to share knowledge with the galaxy, yet they had been abandoned by the very beings they had helped. The thought of it unsettled him deeply. How could a galaxy that claimed to stand for peace and progress turn its back on such a people? "Captain," Lyra spoke again, her voice weak but clear. "We are not the only ones who have suffered. There are others, many others, but we are no longer capable of helping them." Elias knelt beside her, looking into her eyes with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "You've done more than enough. You've shown the galaxy what true peace looks like. I'm here to make sure it doesn't end like this. I'll help you. I promise." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak more, but she could not find the strength. Elias stood and turned to his crew who had gathered around too. The Starfire cruised through the black void of space, the hum of its engines steady and reassuring. Captain Elias Grant stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the star-filled screen ahead. The Celestian refugees, now safely aboard the ship, were, in the lower decks, settling into their new reality. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship running smoothly, but there was an undercurrent of tension that Elias couldn't ignore. He knew the Galactic Council would be coming for them. The decision to help the Celestians had not been an easy one, and the consequences of their actions were clear. The Council had already exiled the peaceful species once, and they wouldn't hesitate to do worse if they found out the humans were harboring them. Elias had taken a risk, one that could cost him and his crew everything. "We need to find a way to outrun them," Elias said quietly to Lieutenant Hawk, who was standing beside him. "We can't afford to be caught." Hawke nodded, his face serious. "I've already sent a distress signal to command. We should have reinforcements soon. But I think we can buy ourselves some time if we change course. There's a nebula on the edge of the system that could hide our signature." Elias looked at the map of the star system projected on the bridge's main screen. It was a dangerous route, but it might be their best chance. The Council's ships were faster and more advanced, but the nebula's thick gas clouds could provide the cover they needed to escape undetected. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "Plot a course," Elias ordered. "Let's take that risk." The crew worked quickly to change their heading, setting the Starfire toward the edge of the system where the nebula loomed. Elias could feel the tension building, not just in the ship but in the hearts of his crew. The decision to help the Celestians had already put them on a path they couldn't easily leave. The stakes had been raised, and they were no longer just explorers. They were fugitives. As the ship changed course, Elias took a moment to think about the Celestians. Their way of life, their culture, and their peaceful ideals were so different from the galaxy they had been exiled from. The Celestians had been unwilling to fight back, unwilling to use force, but now they were in need of protection. Elias had always believed that humans could make a difference in the galaxy. But now, faced with the responsibility of protecting a species from the wrath of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, Elias wasn't so sure. "We're entering the nebula now." Hawk's voice broke through his thoughts. "We'll be in the gas clouds in about 10 minutes. "Keep us steady," Elias said, his voice firm. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. Stay alert." The Starfire entered the nebula, the gas clouds swirling around them. The ship's sensors flickered as the interference from the nebula blocked their ability to get a clear read. On their surroundings, it was disorienting, but it also provided the cover they needed. The bright lights of distant stars were muted, the ship now hidden within the dense clouds of gas. Elias stood at the front of the bridge, staring out at the swirling colors of the nebula. The silence was almost eerie, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The Celestians had trusted him, and now it was up to him to keep them safe. He couldn't fail them. Suddenly, the communication console beeped, interrupting his thoughts. Hawk moved quickly to answer. "Captain," Hawk said, his voice tense. "We've got company." Elias's heart skipped a beat. He had known it was only a matter of time before the Council's ships found them. but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel even more real. He turned to face Hawk. "How many?" Elias asked. "2, maybe 3 council ships," Hawk replied, his eyes scanning the screens. "They're moving fast and they're already inside the nebula. They've picked up our trail." Elias cursed under his breath. The nebula was supposed to give them more time, not lead the council straight to them. He had hoped to get far enough away to reach the backup fleet, but now it seemed they might not have that luxury. "We'll have to make a stand," Elias said, his voice calm but firm. "Prepare the crew. It's time to see what this ship can do." The crew quickly moved into action, preparing for battle. The Starfire wasn't a warship. It was a scientific exploration vessel, but it was well-armed and well-designed for deep space operations. They had a chance, but it was a slim one. The Council's ships were far superior, both in speed and firepower. Still, Elias knew they couldn't just run. Not now. Not when the Celestians were depending on them. "We've got the first Council ship on long-range sensors," Hawk said, his voice tight. "It's closing in fast. They're not playing around." Elias watched the display closely. The Council ship was a sleek, intimidating vessel, its dark hull blending into the nebula. It was armed to the teeth, its weapons clearly visible even at this distance, but Elias wasn't about to back down. "Helm, prepare for evasive maneuvers," Elias ordered. "We need to keep them off balance. Weapons, ready the plasma cannons, but don't fire unless we have to." The crew moved quickly, getting everything into place. The Starfire wasn't built for combat, but it was fast and agile. They had to use that to their advantage. The first Council ship came into range, its guns charging as it locked onto their position. Elias watched the targeting system closely, ready to issue orders at a moment's notice. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He wasn't just protecting his crew anymore, he was protecting a whole species. Suddenly, the Council ship fired, and the bridge was rocked by the impact. The shields flared brightly, holding for a moment before the energy began to fade. "We're losing shields," Hawk shouted. "Evasive maneuvers now," Elias commanded. The Starfire veered sharply, narrowly avoiding another volley of fire. The Council ship wasn't giving them any room to breathe, and Elias could feel the pressure building. They needed to get out of the nebula. They couldn't fight this fight for long. The Starfire was built to explore, not to withstand a prolonged battle. "Captain, we've got a second ship incoming," Hawk said, his voice urgent. "It's coming from the other side. They're trying to box us in." Elias's mind raced. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control. If they stayed in the nebula, the Starfire could be destroyed. But if they tried to escape, they would. "Be wide open to the Council's firepower." "Activate the warp drive," Elias said quickly. "Get us out of here, full speed ahead." The crew scrambled to make the calculations. Elias watched the countdown on the screen, his heart racing. If they could just make it out of the nebula, they could buy themselves some time. They needed to reach the backup fleet, but the Council's ships were relentless. The countdown reached 0 and the Starfire shot forward, the ship shaking as the warp drive engaged. The stars blurred into streaks of light as they sped away, leaving the Council ships behind. But Elias knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The Council would not stop hunting them. They would keep coming until the Celestians were found. And Elias would do whatever it took to protect them. "We're clear," Hawk said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "For now." Elias exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging with the weight of the battle they had just fought. They had won this round, but the war was far from over. The Celestian's future, and his crew's, depended on what came next. "Keep your eyes on the sensors," Elias said, his voice steady but firm. "We're not safe yet. Prepare to jump again if we need to." As the Starfire cruised through the stars, Elias stood at the helm, his thoughts racing. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over, and the Council would stop at nothing to destroy the Celestians. But Elias wasn't about to let that happen. The Starfire drifted silently through space, its hull gleaming under the distant stars. The immediate danger from the Council ships had passed, but Elias Grant knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They had escaped the nebula, but the Council's pursuit was relentless. His mind raced as he thought about what came next. "How are the Celestians?" Elias asked, turning to Lieutenant Hawk, who was sitting at the communications console scanning their surroundings. "They're settling in," Hawk replied. "Lyra is doing better. She's stronger now, and some of the others are starting to regain their strength." "That's good to hear," Elias said quietly, nodding. "But we still need to figure out what we're going to do. We can't keep running forever." Hawk turned to face him, his expression serious. "We need resources, Captain. We can't fight the Council on our own. We're not a warship." Elias took a deep breath. He knew Hawk was right. The Starfire wasn't designed for combat. It was a scientific exploration vessel, not a battle cruiser. Their weapons were limited and their shields were only so strong. Even with the Celestians' technology, they were vastly outmatched by the Council's fleet. "I've been thinking about that," Elias said, his voice steady. "We need help, but not just any help. Someone who can keep us one step ahead." "Of the Council?" Hawk raised an eyebrow. "You have someone in mind?" Elias turned to the map of the galaxy displayed on the bridge's main screen. His finger traced a route to a system on the edge of the known galaxy. A place where few ventured. A place known for its dangerous inhabitants and its connections to the criminal underworld. The Zephyr system. "I have a contact," Elias said, his voice low. "Someone who can help us." Hawk looked at him in confusion. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" "The Zephyr system, The Starfire hummed as it glided through the stars, its crew tense, their minds racing with thoughts of the future. Elias stood at the helm of the ship, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. The Celestians were now settled in the lower decks, safe, for the moment. But Elias knew it wouldn't last. Not as long as the Galactic Council knew they were out there. The Council had resources, fleets, and the power to crush them at any time. The humans and Celestians were no match for the might of the Council's forces. They had escaped once, but how long could they keep running? Elias didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let the Celestians become another lost species, wiped out by the galaxy's most powerful forces. "Captain," Hawk's voice broke through Elias's thoughts. "We've entered a new system. We've got a few minutes before the Council ships can catch up to us. We need to make a decision." Elias turned to face his lieutenant. "What do you suggest, Hawk?" "We can't outrun them forever. The nebula only bought us some time, but they'll catch up eventually. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to make a stand somewhere. I've been scanning the system. There's a planet nearby, remote, barely populated. It could be our best shot." Elias's mind raced. He had already calculated the risks. A planet in the middle of nowhere could offer shelter, but it could also be a trap. The Council would likely know every inch of the galaxy, and there was no hiding forever. "What about resources?" Elias asked. "Do we have enough to hold off the Council for long?" Hawk nodded. "We'll have to make do with what we've got. We've got some supplies from the Zephyr system, but it won't last long. If we take the planet, we'll need to hold it. We can't run anymore." Elias exhaled slowly. The weight of his decision pressed down on him. There was no more running. He couldn't just escape with the Celestians. They needed to fight for their survival. "But how?" "We take the planet," Elias said, his voice steady. "Prepare the crew. We'll make a stand." The Starfire made its way toward the planet, a small blue orb surrounded by asteroid rings. It was remote, barely on any charts, but Elias had hoped that it would be enough of a sanctuary. As the ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, the crew prepared for what might come next. They had no illusions. This would not be easy. The Council would not stop coming after them. Elias stood at the front of the ship, his eyes fixed on the view of the planet below. The Celestians, now organized and stronger, had begun to work alongside the crew to prepare the landing zone. The alliance between the humans and Celestians was stronger now than ever before, but it wasn't enough to guarantee their survival. "Captain," Hawk said, "we've got a Council ship on the scanners. It's not far behind us." Elias nodded, his grip tightening on the armrest. He could feel the tension in the air, the feeling that everything was on the line. They couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Set the landing coordinates, Elias said, his voice low and determined. We'll make our stand here. The Starfire touched down on the surface of the planet, its engines powering down with a low hum. The crew began unloading supplies and setting up defenses. Elias was already planning their next move. They needed to build a stronghold, a place to defend themselves and a way to hold off the Council's forces until they could find a way to break free. As the crew moved swiftly to get everything in place, Elias found Lyra, the Celestian leader, standing alone on a nearby ridge, gazing out at the horizon. Her silver eyes shimmered in the dim light, but there was a sadness in her expression. Elias could see that she was still haunted by the past, by the loss of her people and their homeworld. Lyra, Elias said, his voice gentle as he approached her. How are you holding up? She turned to him, offering a faint smile. I'm not sure I know what holding up means anymore, Captain. My people are scattered across the stars, and now we're on a world that might not even be ours. I don't know what's left for us. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore. We're here. And I'll make sure the Council doesn't destroy what's left of your people. We'll find a way to make this work. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. And if we can't? She asked quietly. Elias's heart clenched. We will. The night was dark and still, the only sounds coming from the distant hum of the Starfire and the soft voices of the crew working tirelessly to fortify their position. Elias knew that the Council was closing in, and that time was running out. He had no illusions about the dangers they faced. But as long as they had a chance, he would fight for it. Suddenly, the alert sounded on the bridge. Hawk's voice was sharp and urgent. Captain, the Council's fleet is on approach. They've sent in reinforcements. We need to prepare for the worst. Elias's pulse quickened. He had known this moment was coming, but he hadn't expected it so soon. Get the weapons online, Elias ordered. Prepare the shields. We're going to have to fight. The Starfire's weapons powered up, the hum of energy vibrating through the ship. But Elias knew that their odds weren't good. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and isolated. They didn't have the firepower to take on the full force of the Council's fleet. They needed a plan. Captain, Hawk said, his voice tight, there's a weak spot in their formation. If we can get close enough, we might be able to strike a decisive blow. Elias's eyes narrowed as he considered their options. It was risky, insanely risky, but it was their best chance. We take it, Elias said, his voice firm. Get us in position. We're going to make our move now. The Starfire accelerated toward the Council fleet, its engines roaring to life as the crew braced for impact. The planet below seemed distant, the possibility of escape fading with each passing moment. Elias gripped the console, his heart pounding in his chest. Ready the plasma cannons, he said, his eyes focused on the enemy ships ahead. The crew moved with precision, working in perfect sync. The Starfire veered sharply, darting toward the opening in the Council fleet's formation. The Council ships were firing now, their weapons blazing, but Elias held steady, guiding the ship through the oncoming fire. Fire! Elias commanded. The plasma cannons fired, the blasts illuminating the dark space. The first Council ship was hit, its shields flickering before it exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The crew cheered, but Elias knew it wasn't over. They had only just begun. The Starfire continued its attack, darting in and out of the Council fleet's range, striking when it could and evading when it had to. But the Council wasn't going to stop. They would keep coming. And Elias knew that at some point they would run out of options. We're taking heavy damage, Hawk said, his voice strained. Shields are down to 40%. We can't keep this up much longer. Elias's mind raced. They needed a miracle. The Celestians needed a chance. And in that moment, Elias knew what he had to do. Hawk, Elias said, his voice steady but filled with determination. I'm going to make a sacrifice. Hawk looked at him, confusion flashing in his eyes. Captain, what are you? I'm going to distract them. You get the Celestians to safety, Elias interrupted, his voice sharp. Hawk, I need you to do this, Elias continued. I'll buy you the time you need, but you have to take them. It's the only way. Hawk's face hardened, but there was no hesitation in his voice. I won't leave you behind, Captain. You don't have a choice, Elias said firmly. This is the only way to save them. Elias turned toward the console, his fingers flying over the controls. The Starfire lurched as its engines powered up for a final, desperate move. I'll hold them off as long as I can, Elias said, his voice steady as he faced the crew. You take the Celestians and get them out of here, that's an order. Hawk didn't say anything more. He simply nodded, his expression filled with a mixture of resolve and regret. Then, without another word, he turned and left the bridge. Elias didn't look back. He had made his choice. The Celestians would survive. The Council would be stopped. And if he had to give everything to make that happen, he would. The Starfire swerved and dipped through the chaos of the Council fleet, its engines roaring as it evaded fire after fire. Elias stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls. The ship was taking heavy damage, its shields were flickering, and its engines were struggling to maintain speed. But Elias wasn't concerned about the ship. His focus was on the mission. He had one goal now: to buy the time his crew needed to escape. I'm not going to let you down, Elias muttered to himself as he guided the ship toward the heart of the Council fleet. His crew, especially Lieutenant Hawk, had already started preparing for the Celestians' evacuation. They had to make it out of here. They had to survive. The galaxy wasn't going to give them a chance, but Elias was determined to give them one anyway. Captain, Hawk's voice crackled over the comms. We've got the Celestians ready. We're setting course for the backup location. Are you sure about this? We can still take the fight to them together. Elias clenched his jaw. He didn't want to leave anyone behind, but this was the only way. The Celestians had to survive. His crew had to survive. The battle wasn't about victory now. It was about giving the Celestians the time they needed to escape. He had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Go now, Hawk. I'll hold them off as long as I can. That's an order. There was a brief silence. Then Hawk responded, his voice heavy with emotion. Understood, Captain. We're leaving now. Elias didn't wait for another word. He turned his